and thank you so much, and thank you for your work in the background on this. Our last two presenters, and I'm actually, I don't know if this is inappropriate, but maybe Denise and Greg, do you both want to come up and speak to the Waitakere one and the Waiheke one? Is it Waitemata? Sorry, I don't know why. I think I just look at Denise and I go, Waiheke, but Waitemata it is. We'll just have all the W's involved in this. Thank you. Thank you both. Thanks, Greg.
Tēnā koutou katoa te committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and Mr Mayor and councillors. I've prepared a short presentation which I'll go through quickly, and perhaps a prescient decision, I thought that I should use a photograph from the recent student climate strike to sum up the issue, which is Dear Adults, time is running out, and I thought that summed things up perfectly. Waitaku Rangers Local Board, we have passed two resolutions a couple of weeks ago, and the first one was that we wish to take the initiative and declare an emergency for the Waitaku Rangers area, and the second one is to urge Auckland Council to do the same thing, and that's what I'm here today to do. And why? You've heard why already, but I'll just very quickly go through it again. The IPCC says that if temperatures rise by more than 1.5 degrees, we face unprecedented risks and weather events. Currently, the way the world is going, we're looking at a 3% plus rise. And the IPCC's conclusion is that to keep it at 1.5 degrees, we have to have a net zero carbon production by the middle of the century. And Greta Thunberg has been mentioned earlier, but I thought that this statement from her sums things up perfectly. And in case you're not aware of her, she's a young Swedish woman who has captured the world's imaginations on this issue. And she says this, she says the climate crisis is the most complex issue that we have ever faced, and it's going to take everything from our part to stop it. But the solution is black and white. We need to stop the emissions of greenhouse gases, because either we limit the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels, or we don't. Either we reach a tipping point where we start a chain reaction with events way beyond human control, or we don't. Either we go on as a civilization, or we don't. There are no grey areas when it comes to survival. And when I say that I want you to panic, I mean that we need to treat the crisis as a crisis. When your house is on fire, you don't sit down and talk about how nice you can rebuild it once you put out the fire. If your house is on fire, you run outside and make sure that everyone is out while you call the fire department, and that requires some level of panic. Currently, under the Council's Low Carbon Action Plan, the proposal was a 40% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. Government, under its Zero Carbon Bill, is now proposing that the country becomes carbon neutral by 2050, and that there are reductions in methane of 10% in the next decade, and between 24 to 47% by 2050. So obviously, this is a perfect opportunity for Council to review those goals. This next slide is a diagram that's been produced by some scientists showing what we have to do to keep temperature increases to 2 degrees Celsius, not 1.5. And it's pretty terrifying. If you look at 2000, if we wanted to keep temperature increases to a reasonable level, at that stage we had to start reducing the amount of CO2 we produced as a world by 10% per year, by 3% per year. Because we've gone on this big splurge since then, and we've produced a whole lot more carbon, because we've spent so much more of the carbon budget that the world has, we're at a stage now where we have to have very extreme reductions in carbon production over a very quick period of time. And just to reinforce this is to keep it at 2 degrees. If we're looking at 1.5 degrees, then we have to start very, very quickly. So far, there's been climate emergency declarations by a number of entities: UK Parliament, Welsh Government, Scotland, London, Wellington, Christchurch, Nelson, ECAN, Kapiti Coast, and Waitaki Rangers Local Board and Waitemata. And from the report that you have today, I think paragraph 9 sums things up perfectly, and that says the declaration would likely increase visibility of Auckland's political commitment to leadership on climate action. Not declaring a climate emergency may result in a perception of or reputational risk, and not acknowledging the urgency of acting on climate change. That's my very quick bullet point list of possible things that we should think about immediately. Our vehicle fleet needs to be sustainable by 2030. We need magnificent public transport, light rail everywhere, walkways and cycleways everywhere, livestock reduction, which could be controversial, reforestation, and can I acknowledge the Mayor's Million Tree project, and we need to keep doing that. And solar power and wind power needs to be given preference to. And to end where I started, time is running out.
Kia ora, thanks Greg, and thanks to the Waitakere Rangers local board for their thought on this. Should we just go straight to Member Roach for the Waitemata climate change declaration?
Tēnā koutou katoa. I also, before I start, I just want to acknowledge the people who've spoken before us, and in particular the rangatahi of Tamaki Makaurau, who I think are offering the greatest challenge to this room, more than probably what we are doing. But I want to speak to you today about the resolution that the Waitemata Local Board passed last week, which is also, which has been sent through to you, and about your resolution to declare an emergency in Auckland, a climate emergency for Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. I want to remind you, councillors, of your role, your leaders in our community, and of course the Mayor as well. And the role of local government, which is to make decisions not just for now, but also into the future, for future generations. That is our role. We now have the 4 Wellbeings back in the Local Government Act, and so it is incumbent on us, on you as councillors and as the Mayor, to be thinking in terms of what we are leaving for our children and our grandchildren, and that is what is before you today in your resolution. So we need to act urgently to address the climate crisis. Really, we've only got a couple of years to turn it around, and that is the urgency you're hearing in the voices of the young people who've spoken to you today. Politicians we frequently think in terms of our legacy, and many of us have a long time in politics where we've delivered fantastic things for our cities and our countries, and I want to acknowledge all of you who have done that. And we need to think about what the legacy will be for this next generation and the generations coming from there as well. Because what it could be and what it will be if we don't act urgently is catastrophe. I want to thank you for the work you've done on the Climate Action Framework. I think it is a good start, but as you've heard from other presenters, it needs to be action focused. I particularly want to mention the just transitions part of the 11 different areas, because we know that low-paid people, people in poorer communities are the ones who are most affected and least resilient in terms of the cost of climate and the impacts of the climate crisis. I think we should stop using climate change. That is no longer the word. The word is climate crisis. I want to assure you that declaring an emergency is not simply symbolic. It's not an empty gesture. It has real value, and others have talked to you about this as well. There's several things that will result from it. First of all, it means that our council can apply a climate crisis lens over all our decision making, and Councillor Walker, you've mentioned this already about that decision making. For every decision that the council makes and local boards make as well, we need to be looking at our plans, at our programs, at our projects, and how will that reduce our emissions. And with that comes the redirection of resources and finances, and that's what we need to build action. We need to look at the immediate actions and wins that we can make quickly. And we can do things quickly. We can do crisis management. We have a whole bunch of people who do that. And I want to acknowledge the Chair of the Civil Defence. Thank you. And we can also, with this declaration, send a very clear message to our citizens who are looking to us and to our government that we are taking it seriously and we are acting. The Prime Minister says this is her generation's nuclear moment. Well, I remember that nuclear moment. I was marching in the streets with lots of people who are around here. We were marching in the streets when there were nuclear-powered and armed warships in our harbours, and we were calling on our government to declare a nuclear-free New Zealand. But before that happened, there were nuclear-free streets, there were nuclear-free communities, there was the nuclear-free Waiheke County Council, and there were nuclear-free cities. So it's that leadership that I am calling upon you and urging you, and the Waitemata Local Board is also urging you to endorse today, because it will lead to action and it will make a difference. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
A couple of quick questions. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the to both of you. I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment. So the Minister for Climate Change has introduced the Zero Carbon Amendment Bill, and it contains a series of climate change targets, none of which are legally enforceable in the current form of the bill. So I'm wanting you to comment on that, because I think that's a conundrum.
Yeah, I do too, actually. Sorry, you okay with me? Yeah, sort of probably a trap for me, I guess, as a Green. But no, I find it very difficult to reconcile. I feel that this is our opportunity to actually regulate. I'm particularly concerned about the lack of action around methane production and the timeliness of that. So the submission that I'll be writing personally will be to have stronger regulation, because it's not going to happen. And I heard the CEO of Fonterra at the Just Transition Summit say that they were looking at a growth model, business as usual, and we can no longer afford to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Last question, Councillor Casey. We said we'd get to the actual agenda item at 11:30. It's now 11:30, so quick question.
Very quick one, and it's for either of you to answer. I've just been thinking about the implications of the declaration today, and I've heard Councillor Walker and yourself, Denise, talk about our decision making and how important it is to have what you call the climate emergency lens. And one of the thoughts I had was that if we pass this today, is it possible, what's your view with regard to, in our council reports for all our decision making, we usually have council group impact, local board impact, Māori impact, financial implications, risks and mitigation, that we had a lens that said climate emergency impact. What do you think?
Just before anyone makes a comment, Councillor Casey, I'm not too sure if you've seen, I circulated my chair's recommendations. That's in there.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen councillors,
them. That's brilliant.
And I think before we have too much comment, just to be clear, we've got the recommendations that are in the agenda, but I have a large number of chair's recommendations which calls for exactly that. And thanks to the Mayor has supported this very, very strongly. So it's in there.
Agreed entirely. And the two biggest practical things I think Council needs to focus on is 2030 having a transport fleet that is completely run on renewable energy, and 2030 having Auckland's power completely renewable. And so certainly if you want to get to those two decisions, then you need to focus every single report on the issue. And Madam Chair, if I could just very quickly respond to Councillor Newman about his question. The UK government do not have binding targets so far. Their model, which New Zealand's is based on, is working pretty well. I would expect there to be extraordinarily strong kickback if the model doesn't work.
I apologise, Greg. Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to respond to Councillor Newman. Thank you both. I'll move that we thank both our presenters warmly. And is there Councillor Casey, would you like to second? Lovely. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you for the work of the two local boards, and please, humble apologies to the Watamata local board. I think it's because Denise lives on Waiheke, so my brain just went straight to Waiheke. Thank Members, we'll move on now to our